Hello there, everyone. Thanks so much for joining us for EuropeActive's webinar on our strategy for COVID-19, reopening and beyond. Obviously, when COVID-19 happened in February, early March, we shifted gear with EuropeActive in order to meaningfully and sensibly respond to the unique challenges that COVID-19 was posing to our sector and to EuropeActive representing our sector. We were at that time in the midst of defining our strategy for 2025, and we decided to halt that process, at least in part, and define a specific strategy for responding to COVID-19 as effectively as possible. Before we move into the details of that and our short and medium-term strategy, I would just like to present our panel today. We're super excited to have Robbie, if you could go to the next slide, please. Yeah, with that, perfect. So we have Ines from Gym Factory. We have Barbara Smith from Fitness News Europe. We have Liz Terry from Health Club Management. And we have Dave, of course, President of EuropeActive, and Jennifer representing our board and our strategy committee. And one very important task for Jennifer is to take your questions and comments today from our press media partners and from all of you who have joined our webinar today, and make sure that your questions and comments will be part of our strategizing process this summer when we pick up again on our work towards 2025. So next slide, Robbie, please. So one of the few things that we actually did finish with regards to our new strategy towards, or for the first 5 years of the new decade, was our revised mission and vision. And as you will have seen, our mission reads, EuropeActive's mission is to promote the interest of all organizations which work towards getting more people more active more often. And of course, that includes our long-standing motto of EuropeActive of getting more people more active more often. But it also specifically mentions all organizations because we very much would like to be the industry association for commercial and non-commercial associations or organizations, actors alike. And of course, a very important part of that is national associations across Europe. We're building and have achieved stronger relations, stronger ties with national associations than ever before moving through COVID-19. And that's of course reflected in that. Next slide, Robbie, please. And our vision, the vision of EuropeActive is to be the leading European voice for fitness, exercise and physical activity. And you will see in that we have broadened up our purpose and our focus to include physical activity in a much broader sense than just the traditional concept of fitness. Our strategy committee, hold on, I just want to say that our strategy committee is looking at a third dimension that we might include in this as we move into the more long-term strategizing process this summer, because we're looking at the community aspect of our sector. How are we valued and cherished as centers for physical, social, and mental well-being in our communities? Obviously a very important element as we've seen through COVID-19, and that we're looking into whether that should be actually directly reflected in our mission vision, but we'll come back to that. Before I hand over to Dave, I just want to say that we will circulate and publish on our COVID-19 webpage the long version of our short and medium term strategy paper. It will be available within a few days on our COVID-19 webpage. You can download the full version with all the details from that webpage. So next slide, please, Robbie, and over to Dave.
Hi, good morning, everybody. The way I'm going to play this is I'm going to go through the different areas, of which you can see the first is a immediate response, and then go to the three journalists who are on the panel with them, an opportunity to ask myself and Andreas any questions, hopefully specific to that area. We want to get through this so we have plenty of time for your questions, which, as Andreas mentioned, Jennifer is moderating, and we'll come back on those. It was pointed out to me just before we came online that I'd done a LinkedIn post saying another webinar and perhaps a dull subject, and I'm the last person who should be calling this a dull subject, as is largely how I've earned my living over the years, but I know that a lot of people, operators and suppliers on this webinar perhaps expect the public affairs policy and the trade association work to be happening in the background and doing all the good stuff they can do. But I don't think there's ever been a time where it's more important that you are helping to influence that direction and are aware of what is going on, because we're all in a new area. So it's not like we're picking up the book of this is how you do it. This is a new book and a new opportunity. So we're learning as we go. So feedback, thoughts, questions are crucial. So going on to immediate responses, which you have there in front of you, and I'll let you read those. But we had a board meeting in 10th of February just to try and give a feel of the context and the overall structure on objectives of what we were talking about being our 2025 strategy were being adopted, and we were ready to finalize the writing of this, go in front of a strategic committee, and we will do that. And that was then to launch at EHFF in FIBO, which, as we all know, didn't happen. So I always see that for us, the crisis really happened with FIBO and EHFF being called off, and us now looking late February in what we do as the sector slowly closed down during March. So various meetings, as you can imagine, and consultation with various people, including the board. And we reached out to national association partners across Europe to see how we could support and get their feedback for EuropeActive's immediate strategy, because it was really clear almost instantly that most countries were going to deal with this nationally as opposed to across Europe. Perhaps the first time where things should have perhaps been more Europe-centric and focused on the EU and working as a group. A lot of countries with the crisis hitting, particularly in Italy, it all became a very national effort, and we needed to make sure that we were able to support national associations, but make sure that we were still being held to account at the European Union, but also were taking this opportunity to drive the industry forward. So in terms of these 5 immediate responses, the socio-economic responses, we needed to get forward the arguments for the importance and impact of economics and health of our sector. And we needed this to be presented to political decision makers. And, you know, the crisis itself and the loads of experts from governments who have spoken about this has done a lot of that work for us. I read a statistic the other day that I think 24% of people questioned about joining gyms now gyms and clubs would consider immunity and resilience to disease as a relevant factor. And I think pre-COVID that ran about 3 to 4%. So that's an enormous impact that happens there. We needed to get proper communication platforms within EuropeActive, including obviously fixed team meetings. You'll have done those in your own businesses, but we needed those to be with stakeholders, get the communication for members, clients, consumers, etc., and get out then the new guidelines. And that new guidelines, and you'll have hopefully visited COVID-19 papers, that has just been the most fantastic effort by the industry as a whole to pull together guidelines, to take best advice from across the world. And we've really just act as an area to group that so people have a good reference area, whether that's beyond social distancing, cleanliness, hygiene, access control, the list goes on. We immediately looked to revise our professional standards for exercise professional through the EuropeActive's Professional Standards Committee, and that will be ongoing, and we'll see how that will develop in light of how different people are in their approach to exercise in clubs, and also restrictions that we have within them. And then promoting and informing stakeholders on building essential digital infrastructure, different offerings, everything that was coming out of this. So initially, I guess that that we were trying to influence national policy matters, but the main focus was having organisation and having an immediate response and a place where people felt, an organisation where people felt was doing its best to have their backs and set the stall out going forward. So I'm going to stop there and go to the three journalists. I think, Robbie, is it possible for everybody to be visible? Obviously not the people who are watching this, but all attending to be visible on the screen? Is that easy, Robbie?
Yeah, I believe so. I think that's it now.
Okay, well, I wouldn't be able to answer that because I've been able to see everybody all the time. I'm hoping you you can now see everybody on the screen. Would be helpful for me. So in terms of that immediate response, Liz, is there any sort of observations or questions you have in that area that we can answer?
I've got thousands of questions. I don't think I've ever been more proud of the industry than I've been in the last couple of months. I think that the response has been unbelievable. You know, we work across 27 different leisure industries within leisure media, and most of the others are curled up in the fetal position, whereas the health and fitness industry has just been so energized and effective and dynamic and humble and team working. Just across all of the different platforms, and the trade associations have just stepped up and just been phenomenal. So I couldn't be prouder. And I think that this document that you've produced is excellent. It's almost like a dream to me to have everything distilled down here. And it echoes the work that the team are doing at EuropeActive as well. So there's just been great collaboration. So, you know, it ticks every box. I think my questions are all around, you know, having an honest conversation about how realistic some of this is and how we actually make it happen. One of the big questions I have is around the whole thing with the health agenda. How do we get a seat at the table in terms of delivering on things like that? And how do we control and deploy digital in an effective way for the industry? And the crux of this is the people. So, you know, we can't deliver on the health agenda without people. And there is a fundamental disconnect for me between the fact that the industry is finding more and more ways to make money without people. So operators without staff, operators more and more streaming digital pre-recorded content and so forth. And these are clearly the commercial ways for the businesses to go to be profitable and to get good share prices and so forth. So how do we balance that? You know, the fact that the industry is moving towards using less people with the fact that many of the things in your strategy require more people and more human interaction to deliver on this amazing vision that we have. So I see a basic and disconnect there, and I think we need to have an honest conversation about that, and would welcome your views on how you would like that to pan out.
Andreas, do you want to take that?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah,
absolutely. I think it's a matter of there's a fundamental question about of gaining recognition for our sector in our communities, and I think it builds into two very important priorities of EuropeActive. One is the public affairs bit, which is about positioning our sector in society, but it's of course also about us taking upon ourselves that responsibility, that we understand ourselves as important centers for physical, social, mental well-being in society, and not strictly the traditional fitness image. I think that's very important, a very important part of you know, getting what we need to get for our offerings in terms of hiring people with higher skills and so on. I think that just like everything else in the world, we'll have a very diverse ecosystem over the coming years. And personally, I think that's a great thing. You know, there's an offering for everybody, digitally and physically, and a lot of different offerings. I think that's a brilliant, you know, dynamism and you know, invention of our sector. just like the rest of the world. But I think in order to create the workplaces and the businesses that can sustain great jobs and lifelong jobs and a lot of jobs, I think it's a matter of gaining our rightful place in society, where we take upon ourselves to ensure high standards of delivery in terms of skills, in terms of our physical facilities and so on. And then I'm 100% sure that there'll be enough consumers who are ready to pay for offerings and thus sustain those jobs. I think it's not just a matter of getting more people hired in our industry as such. That is an important objective, but I think even more importantly, creating lifelong jobs that people are proud of. So working in our sector is not that we move out of that situation where it's something you do while you're young or you're a student, you're a trainer for a little while, and then you move to a different industry. I think it should be a specific priority for our sector generally across Europe to become a grown-up, mature sector where people are proud of working for the whole life.
Okay, of course, we've got in danger of Liz has got a long question, Andreas has got a long answer, and then I say thank you everyone for turning up. That's about it. So I'm trying to follow the time. So I'm just going to have one more. Barbara,
I was expecting to ask all of them.
Yeah, no, I'm sure of that. Barbara, and if we could focus on, obviously this is slightly different because this is the immediate response, but we will fly through this, I have a feeling.
So yes, well, first of all, I'd like to agree that I think EuropeActive's has really stepped up in the last few months, both in terms of representation and also in terms of very concrete guidance and action to help out the sector in a very complex situation with all sorts of different approaches to the health crisis in different European countries. And different constraints now. I was very interested also in the introduction, the new mission that you described, the kind of widened remit that you're looking at. And in this context, I was wondering how is that going to concretely change, potentially the participation in EuropeActive? What kind of members would you be able to welcome that maybe you weren't addressing before, and secondly, how do you avoid overlap with other organizations that have at least part of their mission statements that is fairly similar, such as on a European level, such as FESI, for example?
Andreas? I've got my view.
Yeah. So I think at the same time we have kind of focused in more on what our core stakeholders is. So, for example, nutrition and a lot of related areas. We will not see as our stakeholder base anymore. But then we've broadened up, of course, our focus as well, with looking more at health enhancing physical activity rather than just fitness. And of course there will be some overlaps. We would like to welcome to our ranks all organizations, as we state, who work towards getting more people more active more often, in a more specific WHO term, organizations working for health enhancing physical activity. So there will be some overlaps, and we're very happy to work with those other NGOs and organizations towards those goals. Basically, yeah.
Yeah, I think Barbara, I think that you make a really good point that, and we will tread on people's toes, but it's always been a challenge of trade associations. It's even been a challenge just within fitness, whether EuropeActive or EuropeActive tread on URSA's toes or URSA's and so on and so forth. And I know from my days at EuropeActive there was that way treading on Sport England's toes, how to and all that. This crisis for me says that we all need to grow up a little bit and be able to have these conversations and realize that we're all working to the greater good. And I'm not saying that negatively against those organizations any more than I would be saying it against myself sitting at at the helm, let's say once upon a time at UK Active. Now's a time where we've just got to have those grown-up conversations and work together towards the end. But I have no doubt, particularly in Europe, and particularly as we broaden our reach from health and fitness, which kind of fits under sports, to looking at more at health, which fits under health, that is going to happen. I would just like to hope that we can do it diplomatically and in partnership, because we're all after the same gain. Would be my hope. But experience tells me that there's going to be a few arguments and disagreements on the way, undoubtedly.
So for example, I was thinking in terms of the stakeholders. I was thinking about insurance. If you're talking about health on a broader level, I mean, you see people like UK Active actually partnering with insurance companies on events, at least, I think. So I mean, do you see any avenue there to involve more people from that sector?
I definitely do. I think we have to be cautious and careful as we involve sectors. Right. You bring somebody in, let's say, on nutrition, and do we involve one of the big beverage manufacturers, which is actually very different in their stance to what we're about? And I guess they would say, if we are all thinking of the same beverage manufacturer, which we possibly are, that they probably produce more water than any other beverage manufacturer, and so it goes on. So and insurance, we're not there to drive their profit margins. We're there to get a healthier nation, and hopefully give our members the opportunity to benefit from offering services. So I think we have to be selective. We have to make sure these businesses don't just play lip service to health and well-being, but actually it's deeply ingrained in their missions. And then we need to look at those partnerships. It's a path that has to be trod very carefully.
Sorry to barge in again, but I was slightly surprised by Andreas's statement that nutrition is out, to put it a bit bluntly, because I can see your point with the beverages, if we are indeed talking about the same people, but nutrition is very much part of health and fitness, isn't it?
It is absolutely part of health and fitness. I think that when Andreas is thinking of that sort of nutrition point of view, it is perhaps the unhealthy side of nutrition, and it is also making sure that if we're going to have, the nutrition is crucial. We know nutrition is a crucial background of health and fitness. You can do everything else, but you don't get that right, it perhaps doesn't have the results or effects. So we will need those partnerships, but we will be looking very specifically at people who are operating within the space of enhancing people's well-being. So yeah.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to, only because of time, and then I'll bring you forward in the first question on the next thing, go to the next slide and the next one. So this area, the next slides, I sort of, we at EuropeActive, we break things down into departments, not surprisingly. So member services, educational services, US public affairs and projects, and obviously communications, which binds it all together. I'm going to start with member services, and now sort of looking at where we're going in the medium term. So we really have listened to our members and stakeholders from the beginning of this crisis. And I think we identified fairly quickly the important need of operators and suppliers that needed to be covered by our member service departments across Europe. And the general request was high-level expertise and an insight on operating through COVID-19, which at the time was, of course, as we all know, an entirely new and unknown situation. And we spent a lot of time and a lot of resources, hopefully, on delivering the best possible educational webinars. And I don't say that flippantly. We've worked really hard, and there's been some great webinars on other platforms, and I'm not knocking those at all. But we really have worked very hard, and we're very grateful to partners, both suppliers, operators, trade associations, for providing us with great expertise in order to get these webinars, etc., going, and to start looking at what was happening. Many of you will have been on the webinar which showed the opening up of the East Asian markets, and what is now opening up across Europe. And we divided this very much between Wednesday and Thursday webinars, and they were focused on stakeholders, but also we were trying to bring trade associations together, and that has been a fantastic positive out of this. The trade associations working together. EuropeActive has always been a sort of big trade association, and the others have done some fantastic work, and it has been great to see the value of these other associations and them coming to the table and really coming out with some fantastic ideas. So from my view, for the first time, trade associations all working actively together in order to work best for their countries and for Europe, with us acting as help with that. And we needed to also adjust and adapt our events for our sector's leaders and executive, as well as our exercise professionals. And so those are the three areas we've concentrated on, and I think we've achieved well in that, and we will continue to do that. I do think people are going back to work, and there's only so many webinars you can do, and the amount of people have said to me, this is the busiest time I've ever had. I think at least 3 just when we were talking before we came on this webinar. So and now we've got to get back to opening places up, so we need to be more succinct, and we perhaps need to look at podcasts and other opportunities there, and use this as an opportunity to change the way forward. So focusing particularly on member services, and I would like to go to you for any question you have that you see that we should either focus on or has been successful or of interest.
I agree with all you said about the webinars and how we see we are all the time connected, and I think we need the digital media, which have obviously come to stay, as all we know, even when the pandemic is over. You said that you will launch an advisory board among the CEOs of the most important multinational chains and suppliers, with the aim of achieving greater social recognition of physical activity on long term. Will we see this advisory board continue over time? I mean, after C19, as there is a great opportunity to work and get the physical activity sector to fight better together and being recognized not just as only sport, but a health matter in all European countries, and thus benefit users with a tax cut, which could impact directly on the registration fees. In Spain and Portugal, I think you know, we have extremely high taxes of 21% and 23%. So
yes, I think that is such an interesting point you raise. We're launching a president's group made up of CEOs of multinational operators, and we will do the same with the suppliers and other groups. It's kind of one chunk at a time. This isn't just to get through this. This is to take our industry forward and keep it on the crest of that wave, and having the opportunity to influence. And your point on taxes is the one which I think has probably been raised just over the whole time I've ever been in this industry, as you know, we're delivering a health message. and never has it been clearer. We have to be a little bit clearer, because I think I'm right, and I apologize if I'm not. I think that no EU country can go under 15% VAT. I think that's set by the EU Parliament. I know that you have the opportunity to have 2 per area, two variations on that, and of course we're in a completely new environment, so it is time to push that door. I do put just a slight word of caution that if we're successful, and I really hope we are, the industry needs to understand that the success of negotiating, and I know in Germany they're doing some provisional things in terms of lower rates, needs to be passed on to the consumer. The governments across the world, we could cynically say it's in order to get the voting public, or we could say it's what they will say to get more people active and more people healthy. But if we're able to successfully get a reduction in VAT in one country, in Europe, across the world, wherever it happens to be, I get very nervous, because I often hear people say, oh, blimey, there's a bigger margin on our membership fees. And it just doesn't work like that. It just doesn't work like that, because the door will be shut as quickly as it's open if that's our approach. Our approach has to be to pass on these savings to the consumers, therefore driving more consumers into the ability to use facilities, and we make our margins and we make our profit by having more people in our facilities and a bigger membership base. If we see it as a way of being more profitable, ourselves, by just taking the money, the door will be closed. And if you were to think about it, it possibly should be, because VAT is a value-added tax. If they're removing it, it's value to the consumer, not to ourselves. But I think we have a great opportunity, and I would hope that it will be one of the main strings of the strategy of what is being currently termed the President's Council once it's up and running, using their individual and combined force to drive that in those various countries.
Dave, could you tell us maybe more about this President's Council, in the sense, how is it going to work, and who's going to be on it? How are you going to choose who's on it? You mentioned, I believe, representatives of the bigger chains, but of course, there's also smaller players in the industry. So how do you make sure that their interests are represented as well?
Yeah, I'll deal with the first bit first. You'll see in the document, look, there may be chief executives of chains on this call going, what's that all about? And the truth is they wouldn't know, because they haven't been, well, some have been spoken to in terms of the idea, but the aim is initially to look for operating CEOs or senior people who cross borders, who have operations in more than one country. That is the aim with this group, and it is that they traditionally, in this interest, it has been a set of people who have been hugely philanthropic. As long as I can remember, the generosity of CEOs to this industry has been enormous. So I do think that that firstly there will be, hopefully they will see the strategy where they will be able to provide the funds to fund the people who are necessary to do exactly the type of comment that Ines made about VAT and things like that. But we need to make sure that they are not saying what works for us, therefore that is what we're willing to do. And how do we, so that comes to your second point, how do we counteract that? We counteract that by having a board that represents the whole sector, and that board ultimately will agree or not agree with the direction of that President's Council. And And the President's Council is just not the only council. It's just the first one. It's just the first one. We could, you know, if I was to write on a list, there could be a President's Council, a Suppliers Council, a Single Operators Council. You could go on and on and on. But then we would just have a lot of headings and a lot of meetings and not a lot of progress. So it's a question of feeding them in as EuropeActive and as the various local trade associations are able to benefit from their services. We're also very aware that a lot of the smaller operators, the key people there literally have their hand on the pumps, have no time to give currently. Mm-hmm. They have no time to give, and they certainly have no money to give.
If I may just present a comment, of course, in terms of sort of the democratic mandate of EuropeActive, that is in the hands of the board, of course, and our board is in charge, and we have strengthened and we will continue to strengthen the voice and place of national associations at our board. So of course that, you know, the national associations we see as the direct voice of the local and national industries across Europe. And we're strengthening that voice at the very top of EuropeActive, of our association. And of course, the President's Council will be an advisory board, and it will be a board of, as Dave mentioned, quite philanthropic CEOs of large organizations of the sector who have shown willingness during this crisis to do good for our industry. So the first three overall priorities will be the PA strategy, positioning our sector towards public health. It will be upskilling our sector, so making sure that we get proper standards and get a proper implementation of these standards across the industry in Europe. And the third big priority will be building proper data gathering infrastructure, just like EuropeActive has been doing with 4Global and LeisureNet in the UK. We want to do that across Europe so that our publications are based on data going forward. I mean, they of course already are, but our data collection infrastructure isn't as strong as we'd like to be. So those, you know, are really the overall priorities, and they are linked or focused on doing good for the industry. And we find that it's quite legitimate that the bigger players of the industry come together to sort of raise the bar for the whole industry, and they've shown willingness to do so, which is, I think, is great.
Okay, I'm remaining very aware of time. I'm going to just run through what's happening. If we go to the next slide, which is the educational sector, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to go through the educational sector and the public affairs one slide straight after each other, so we can have a little bit more space in terms of slides. So on the educational sector, our department, my view, they've done an exceptional job. They've connected with PTs, trainers, exercise professionals, and accredited training providers across Europe. Continuous roundtables with those trainers and providers, and they've created their own EREPS ambassadors and EREPS heroes program, and been very aware of, you know, that a lot of professionals have been furloughed or are self-employed, and in fact have had very tough times during this, and to start looking at the best practice and guidance for when they came back. Julian Berriman, who many of you will know, the director of the Professional Standards Committee, he's working very closely with academic experts and our projects department to make sure that we update our standards, and that is all coming back and upskilling our sector. We need to be very aware, you know, right down to the small, you know, you can only get so many people into a gym because there is certain restriction, let's say, on how many people you're going to have there. From an operator point of view, it's one paying punter against a fitness instructor. You know, what we cannot do is be losing these professionals. And we also need to be very minded that we're a people's industry. I've said it before in these seminars. I started my career as a personal trainer, and I believe that people are at the core of absolutely everything we do. And Liz brought it up at the very beginning of how, in her list of publications, how well we as an industry have reacted. And that is about the people. And we need to be very aware of those people as we come back in. So from Julian's point of view, in that educational area, there is an awful lot that has happened there. Can we move on and on again? So that moves on to the public affairs and policy, which kind of ultimately influences all we're talking about. And as I talk, I think, wow, you know, this just sounds like, you know, you could read this as a dream. You could just say, oh yeah, absolutely, wouldn't this be fantastic? Yeah, yeah. But we have to start with that expectation. And what EU and public affairs people do is they put reality into that. They put reality into that, and they put what can be achieved. And that for me has been a key area here. They've done well in uniting leaders of the trade associations, adjusting our own EU funded programs and seeing where that can go, and Be Active Hour cannot really be understated in terms of the impact it has at the Commission level. You know, it's the first time in our industry where the commissioners themselves have embraced our industry, and so we see it being absolutely crucial going forward that our EU public affairs projects and programs team will exist to pull all this together. So as things come out of presidents' councils and all the other councils that we talk about, out of members, out of trade associations, that the dream becomes a reality because we keep the pressure on to keep the profile high, working with those other national associations. So I'm going to go to Liz. We've got sort of time for a couple of questions, and then I'm going to do a couple of slides, and then I'm very keen to, can I remind everybody that Jennifer will take any questions from the floor and bring them forward, and it really is important that you get these questions in. This is an open discussion. Liz, over to you.
Yeah, I've got two quick ones. The first is that as an industry, most of the data and evidence that we've been gathering about performance has been related to investment, so to underpin investment decisions, so number of clubs, number of members, spend, you know, profitability and so forth of our businesses. While we've been in this very strong development stage, now things are going to get a lot tougher post Covid-19 lockdown. Is there an argument for moving and developing a much stronger stream of consumer insight and actually starting to get an awful lot better at doing consumer insight research? And should that be part of this strategy when we're talking about evidencing what we do, particularly with governments? And the second question is around digital. So we have been very much a brick and mortar industry, and EuropeActive and the other trade associations have very much represented the owners of brick and mortar businesses. Now that digital is becoming suddenly so important, most operators are looking to move to some kind of hybrid model where they will combine digital and physical experiences in sort of one customer journey. Are we going to welcome the providers of digital content within our trade associations as members, and are we going to start representing them and treating them in equal measure with the facility owners? And are we going to, for example, start counting digital interactions with consumers towards our goals of membership effectively? So, you know, we've got this penetration goal of 20%. Is that eventually going to include digital interactions with consumers? So are we going to fully integrate with digital, and at what point from a strategic point of view? Or is that going to be something which is sort of still seen as being slightly outside of the sector, which is defined by the brick and mortar infrastructure, you know, trade associations and so forth? So those are kind of two strategic questions that I'd be interested to some answers to. The consumer insight side in terms of how we're sort of, you know, understanding what we do, and digital, how quickly can we integrate with that, and is there an intention to do that?
Andreas, do you want to kick off, and I'll
So first of all, I completely agree that the consumer aspect and view is absolutely critical for us. So to put it very briefly, that's why we need to build the data collection infrastructure that EuropeActive, similar to what EuropeActive has initiated in the UK with For Global and Lesionet, and that's what we are aiming at. Of course, there's an intermediary way where we interact with partners across Europe to gather this data. But ideally speaking, we will have the continuous data collection from across the continent through a proper digital data collection infrastructure. And our President's Council is very important in getting the resources and driving that forward.
I think it's the insight side that I'm also very interested in, because we just have never done this as an industry. You know, it's been an absolute blind spot that we've just never had proper consumer insight.
Right, I completely agree.
Liz, I think the truth is that as we put this document together, it hasn't been part of that document, and it needs to be part of our strategy to get that consumer insight. So I think the fact is that we have it in our mind, but we need to put it in there as something that is solid and part of what we're planning to do. So I agree, we need to do that.
And how about digital?
In terms of the digital, there's a specific objective of ours to truly embrace the digital part of our ecosystem. So the first thing we've done is to set up a digital steering committee of different actors and experts representing that field or that part of our ecosystem, and then we are envisioning a council in the future, similar to the President's Council, to really frame and embrace that part of the ecosystem, and potentially in the future driving forward innovation and best practice sharing and all of that in that community, so that we proudly embrace that part of our sector. Of course, that's a very important part of getting more people more active more often through digital, right?
Will we start to count them? Are we saying that our 20% goal could become a 30% goal if we also count digital interactions with consumers? I mean, is that something that you're looking at?
Absolutely.
Well, make its way into the strategy document eventually. Yeah.
Very good idea.
I think the truth is, once again, I'm saying, Liz, you're pointing to a point that should be part of that strategy document and should be identified in there. So yes.
Interesting. Okay, thank you for the comments.
Ines, any point from you?
Yeah, well, I think we are in a crucial moment for exercising with the supports of government. I mean, today I read in the press regarding this issue that a renowned Belgian sports specialist doctor has advised the Belgian government stating that no medicine can strengthen the immune system like the sports. And EuropeActive launched in 2015 the ACTIV's program to promote the physical activity. Considering the historical moment in which we are living right now, don't you think next program should count on the support of the ministries of sports, education and health of the European countries? I mean, and the message is no medicine can strengthen the immunitary system like a sport. This is something that would reduce possible infections. So I think this is the key. What do you think about this? Don't you think it's the moment?
Andreas?
Yeah, so again, just briefly, so that we have time for the Q&A, but briefly, Ines, and we've of course very much like to have this conversation one-on-one if you like, but that's why we're building our think tank. We are stepping up our current knowledge center and making it an active research center, drawing in our academic partners and scientific partners from across Europe that we already have in our network. But that sort of things we really intend to step up and make sure that we have that proper research underpinning those arguments, that our sector has a really important role to play in prehab, in preventive health. All of this, we want, as much as possible, all the brilliant aspects of physical activity in terms of physical, social, mental well-being, that we need to present to policymakers and make sure that we have our proper position in that debate.
I think immunity being a relevant reason to join a club. Before this, it would have scored, well, we know it scored between 3% and 4% of people saw that, and the sort of 24 24%. You know, it's a whole new area. We've always known it. We've always known that we have that magic pill. That's something that if you could patent it, everyone would love to. So I think it becomes more relevant. Barbara, a point from you, a question before I go into 2 comments and then hand to Jennifer.
No, I just wanted to maybe complement Liz's question about data. So it's very interesting to Fitness Media, of course, being a business publication. Is that a lot of the data from different organizations count gym members, and that's kind of blurring the market picture because you know, apart from the digital users that Liz referred to, there's also a lot of gym users that aren't gym members using fitness pass aggregators, for example, or using boutiques, etc. So I think, you know, that would be interesting to see how you think about integrating this data as well.
I'm always letting Andreas go first because his answers are so much more sophisticated.
Just looking at the time, we'll note it down, Barbara, if we may, and then come back to you with a proper question or proper answer in writing. But very good point, and I absolutely agree that this is really important.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to go on to the last slides, and really you can read there. So what has it taught us? Yeah, it's taught us how to write a strategy in challenging times, and we've had to do that at high speed. And even in the course of this conversation, the comment from the 3 journalists, we know that we need to write more into that strategy. And like any strategy, it should be a working document and going forward with clear goals. We need to stick to our mission vision. You've got that, and you know that healthy living, including physical activity, we know is more relevant than ever. And going to this point, we need to get that point through to government. Can everyone hear my dog outside? I apologise if you can. Obviously,
thunderstorm outside.
Yeah, obviously, some cat has decided that the garden is an area of mutual attraction. So we work through these factors. So we've learned an awful lot. But what we've really learned is our sector needs to reposition towards health, well-being, and community. We need to be absolutely focused on that. Could we go forward 1 slide? So what's next? There's a target to reach 100 million European club members. We want to build the strongest possible sector association for the European fitness industry, and we want to be part of helping associations across Europe being strong in their various countries. Move towards and beyond the penetration, and that will be about trying to get those statistics and facts correct. Let's really understand the numbers properly about who is taking part in this. Move towards health and physical, and going back to Barbara's point, without stepping on too many people's toes, but hopefully understanding that at this point that there is a need, and people will be more willing to talk. We want to be the intellectual backbone. We want to be able to provide the documents, be able to call upon the experts, the professors, the leaders across the industry to provide us the information, whether that be across sport and physical activity, across finance, or across more academic things. We want to be that think tank and lead our sector towards being recognised community space for physical, social, and mental well-being. I would add to that, I guess that something is not on there that is within the document and is mentioned in the document. I also want to see our sector showing that we can have a big environmental impact, and that the people within our sector write down, you know, whether you happen to be a fitness instructor, a manager, a CEO, a company, an organization, a provider, or a supplier, that we're able to pledge something, that the one good thing that has come out of this is a healthier planet, and that our sector can carry on influencing that outcome. So I'm going to hand over a little bit late. I apologize, Jennifer, but I'm going to hand over to Jennifer.
This is possibly the most difficult role you've asked me to do so far, because you guys are asking so many questions and I'm like, oh, I have a comment too. And then I realized I just have to put myself on mute on this. It's just it's just really relevant at this moment, and of course there's lots and lots of different perspectives. What I'd like to propose, because we have three fantastic journalists on the call that didn't really get a ton of time to ask questions, I'd like to propose that we get a list of their questions for us and perhaps answer them and post it online later. Because this was a lot of material to cover in such a short amount of time. So I'm sure they have burning questions, and we have a few questions from the participants. I've got three right here, so you're gonna have to keep your questions your answers extremely short, otherwise we won't get through all three. But in that event, I will just add them to the lists of the bigger questions, and we can circle back on them later. The first was actually a comment, but I'm going to reframe it to a question, and I'm going to paraphrase as well because it was a bit long. The idea or the feedback is that this is a very well-intentioned, but the fear is that this plan is a bit unrealistic, because without serious investment and people, there won't be the resources to see it through. So how do you see getting more resources and more people to make this a reality?
Yeah, I'm going to try and answer that really quickly. It's funny hearing that question. I would put money, and I don't know who's attending this, but I will put money on that was written by Steve Ward. Worked with him for too many years not to spot his way of writing. The truth is, Steve, it's going to require money, and it is going to require the generosity of organisations within our sector. And that is not obviously the entire function of the President's Council, just to produce money. But I am hoping that if our organisation recognises the importance of staying at the top of that crest of the wave and being deliverers, that people will pay. Jennifer, I know that even when you've recently joined the board, and you've said, some of this information should be paid for. It's good information, and the more you pay for information, the better quality the information we can get, and so on. So, it's not a begging bowl. It's you want the industry to work for you. It has to be it has to be paid for, just like you pay for your own marketing. So there will be campaigns around that.
Okay, thank you. Question 2 is from Ray Algar. He asks, and it's related to the consumer data. So how do you collect data and get to share it across the entire industry, rather than having it as a pay-per-view sort of situation with the research that is available?
Andreas, do you want to? I come back. I'm happy to make a comment.
So yeah, so to state it briefly, if you've seen the post COVID-19 reports coming out of EuropeActive, I think that's a perfect example of what we want to do at the European level. We want that constant stream of data coming into our research center, and being able to publish database publications like that. That's the ideal that we want to move towards. There's really no good alternative, because otherwise we'd have to rely on very varying data collection partners across the European market, and obviously our publications don't get the best quality if we with that situation. But that's of course what we currently have. We do the best that we can in terms of quality assurance of data, but ideally speaking, we need to move to that proper infrastructure.
Yeah, I think we just got to work very hard at it, Ray. I laugh when I see Ray's on there, because when I wrote on my LinkedIn comment, this topic might be a little bit boring, he came back and said it got as far as boring and immediately signed up, because there's no one like Ray for gathering of data. So Ray, it might be you we're coming back for to see a way forward with Oxygen.
Okay, we're down to our last minute, and I have a question from Michelle Kyra. I hope I said your last name correctly. It's a comment which we can flip to a question with how will we do this, is that she feels that there needs to be a huge focus on two demographics, specifically one, parents with children at home, and two, those living with existing mental health issues. The Be Active Hour was a great start, but she feels like there should have been during a weekday to be inclusive of the at-home families. So how can we make sure to include those demographics in future initiatives?
I think it's a really valid point. The Be Active Hour was selected in discussion with the commissioners in terms of that hour. There will be more campaigns coming out with them. They agreed with that it was successful. I agree with both the areas she talks about, parents with children at home, and definitely the existing mental health issues is a huge area of concern. Those are debates which the Public Affairs and Policy team need to have with the Commission, take them on board, and make sure that that as we move forward, that we are making sure that we are covering those areas. But both those headings and others we do have as crucial parts of our strategy.
We are officially at 2:01, so are we at our time limit?
No, we are at our time limit. So unless there is another question, I mean, there's two things I'd quite like to do. I'll let Andreas do the closing comments, but Jennifer, you've joined the board and you're part of that strategy group, and obviously the documentation. I think maybe a comment from you, as someone who works in an enormous organisation, has just joined this board on how you see EuropeActive and its strategy going forward, and then Andreas closing. I've sideswiped you there, Jennifer. I apologise.
No, that's okay. I see, and I really believe that EuropeActive has a big role to play for the sector in the future, and the relevance of the trade associations has never been more real since the lockdown, since the COVID crisis. I think ultimately we have a very ambitious document, and our job now is to prioritize and make sure that we can deliver on the key priorities and then have a plan for the rest.
Thank you very much. Andreas, do you want to make some closing remarks and remind everyone that that document's coming out? Yep.
Yes, absolutely. I would like, of course, to say thank you to Liz and Barbara and Ines, David and Jennifer, of course, for putting this together for us and being with us today and putting a critical eye on our strategy process. Please, Jennifer will gather our different comments and questions from the audience, and if our journalists could forward your questions for our strategy process for 2025, which will kick off later this summer. We'll publish our strategy document that we have been commenting on here today. Our journalists were the first to see the draft document, and the final version will be published on the COVID-19 page of EuropeActive.eu later this week. And everybody who has good comments and questions for that process and for the documents, please forward it to us, and we'll make sure that it's put before our strategy committee, which, as I said, meets later this summer to kick off our 2025 strategizing again. So thanks so much. Thanks for a brilliant webinar. That was truly insightful and a really good discussion, I think.
Thank you.
If you want to.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you.